Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm very excited to bring you a look at the new Transformers Shattered Glass Blurr. Shattered Glass is a very unique and very interesting subline that is only available through Hasbro Pulse here in the United States. And this line is the first officially widely released take on the Shattered Glass concept that was introduced by Fun Publications and their Collectors Club and BotCon all those years ago. You know, the idea of evil Autobots and heroic Decepticons, just an inverse of your typical Transformers lore. Now, the Shattered Glass of old mainly focused on inversions of G1 characters, but using toys that typically don't normally belong to those characters. And it's really mostly just due to the fact that that's all that was available at the time. You know, Generations hadn't really become a thing yet, which meant there weren't a whole lot of, modern updates to G1 characters out there. This new line is a bit different because it takes toys which are decidedly their Generation 1 counterparts and then just changes up their colors, often changing their head sculpt, and sometimes even giving them new accessories to make an evil version of them, which is kind of a blend of the original Shattered Glass version of that character and then their standard G1 counterpart. In fact, even though Blurr here is the first official release in the Shattered Glass line, we got kind of a preview in the Generation Selects line when we did get a Shattered Glass Optimus Prime and Ratchet. Though not officially branded with Shattered Glass, they were the first characters actually released by Hasbro themselves to fall under that banner. Anyway, if you've seen my reviews before, you know this goes. We're going to take a look at Blurr's packaging. We're also going to get a good look at this exclusive comic that the figure comes with, because all of the Shattered Glass toys bought through Pulse do come with an exclusive special edition covered version of the Shattered Glass comics, which are being released currently by IDW. And then we'll open up our box, we'll get a look at the instructions, and then we'll see Blurr himself in both vehicle and robot modes. Naturally, I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Blurr comes in the first official Shattered Glass packaging, and it's very unique in its shape. It's kind of similar to your current generation stuff, except it's kind of got these like jagged cut shapes going through it. So you get one chunk that's kind of cut right here, and then another one that's cut right here, and I guess that's to just kind of homage the idea of, broken glass, right? This thing's very fractured looking. You can see Blurr in a plastic window here, which is surprising because not only is the window plastic, but his little shell he's in is also plastic, though they've largely done away with those. But I guess they're still keeping them around for this subline. Oh, and Blurr, if you can't tell already, is a retool of the Studio Series 86 toy, so just in case you're wondering. Here you can see the character's name, you get the Shattered Glass brand and the logo, Transformers with this cool little color gradient, and then you get a little cutaway bit of Blurr's art here. Notice he sports a very prominent metallic eye patch, just like his original SG incarnation. And speaking of that, his head is an all-new piece, which actually homages the original Shattered Glass Blurr's head, which itself was derivative of the Transformers Cybertron Blurr, who in turn was derivative of G1 Blurr. So it's an interesting cyclical evolution there of this design. Dig that. Right here on the side, you get some more art of Blurr, seeing more of his body and his blaster. Then on the back, you get your renders, and they look very similar to the standard 86 Blurr's renders. So you can see vehicle mode, robot mode. He takes 18 steps to transform. He still comes with his blaster and his little welding torch tool thing. Honestly, I kind of wish they would have left that out of this release, or better yet, replaced it with maybe like a second blaster. Something, but oh well. I don't see, this evil bounty hunter guy having much use for a welding torch. And then on this side, you get a more full body picture of the character, complete with the whole Shattered Glass logo and all that fun stuff. Now let's set this aside for a moment and take a look at this comic. Now, I'm not going to go through the comic itself. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that actually wants to read it, because it is available in stores right now. But we'll mostly focus on the cover. It's this really, really nice cover here of Blurr, and it's like a somewhat metallic cover, like our somewhat foil cover. Like the logo right here is in foil, and then you get this shiny quality to certain parts. His purple Autobot symbol, and then the bits of glass here is kind of bursting through. So it's very nice. And then the rest of it is very matte, so it gives a very premium look. You got the Hasbro Pulse logo on the back. And who does the cover here? Let's look in the back. I forget who does. Was it Guido Guidi that did all the retailer covers? Oh. Here we go. Oh no. So this is Joanna Lafuente? I think that's how you pronounce it. Oh no, that's just the colors. So Casey Collar did the inks. I can see that, yeah. All right, so don't want to spoil too much. Oh god, spoilers. Don't look. But the comic itself is drawn by Guido Guidi, which is amazing because he is a fantastic Transformers artist, one of the best. And I've actually read the standard version of this already. I can tell you, I really liked it. Like, it is one of the best Transformers comics put out there, you know, in the last couple years. So I highly recommend it personally. I don't know if you guys, you know, buy the comics or care for the new stuff, but I'd give this a try. It does feel kind of like early run IDW stuff, though obviously with the twist of the Autobots being bad guys. But I think it was done very, very well, both the writing and the artwork and the colors and all that. All right, so now that we've looked at everything on the outside, let's take a look at what's on the inside. Okay, so here's the instruction book for Blurr, and you can see it's done up in this dark blue and pink with the gradient here on the Transformers logo. So a lot like the outer packaging. Nice close-up render of his face and his shoulders and all that. Kind of like a bust-style render. All right, so we get this open. It's pretty small. Not much there. So here it's just the weapon placement for the robot mode. You can place the welder on one hand, blaster on the other. And then it goes straight to the transformation to his futuristic hover car type mode. Shows you where to store the weapons underneath, and then your finished product. So nothing new there. It's just like the Studio Series Blurr. Not a whole lot to dissect. Now we get to see Blurr in his vehicle mode. And structurally, it's the same as a Studio Series figure, but it's got a pretty markedly different paint scheme. You can see the car is mostly black and deep blue with these really cool lightning effects here on the front areas. You get a little bit of a lighter blue, but not too light, just in some accent areas, the seating area. You get this really cool amber color for the cockpit. I really dig that. It looks awesome. And then everything else is cast in just kind of a medium gray with a somewhat pearly quality to it. A little bit of silver paint right here, which will be the shins. Some more silver paint there and there. So I gotta say, it looks pretty good. The weapon storage is, as always, optional, right? If you don't want the weapons hanging off the front, you can always take them off. Give them a cleaner look like that. No wheels or anything, because he is a hover car, and even though the Titans Return Blurr had wheels, and the original Blurr, and pretty much every other Blurr, they opted not to do wheels for this mold, so oh well. Here's a comparison shot with the standard Autobot Blurr, and again, same molding, but I do have to say, I really, really like the colors of the new toy a lot more. The cartoon-inspired colors for Studio Series Blurr are just, they're a little too bright for me. It makes them look very play school-like. I really did prefer, you know, somewhat more muted colors used on like the original toy. The Titans Return toy could have used some more variety in the colors, but overall I did prefer the shades used, because this to me is just, it's kind of an eyesore. So it's entirely subjective, but I do find myself preferring the new color scheme just a lot more. It's really cool looking. Okay, well, here is Blurr's robot mode, and most of you are probably already noticing something is amiss. You can see he's got this big old flap of arm kibble just hanging off here. You know why that is? Let me show you. That's why. It will absolutely not stay up. There is practically zero friction keeping this thing in place. Now, like, this is horrible. I can get it to kind of balance if I hold his arm completely straight and use gravity to work against it, but that's unacceptable. I'm sorry. Like, the toy's practically unusable like that. And I hate that this is the case, because I wanted to say nothing but good things about this figure. I, was over here thinking like, oh, this could be so much better than the Studio Series version in like every way. But with a major QC issue like that, I mean, how can I sing this thing's praises? Now, I don't know how widespread this is. It might just be my copy, it might just be a few copies, it might be most or all copies. I hope not, because you should be able to buy this guy and feel better about the purchase than, what you got for the Studio Series Blurr. And if this is a major issue, it's going to make this thing, like, very not recommended. Like, you can't have a toy that's so dysfunctional. And unfortunately, this is held together on a pin, which is much, much more difficult to try to alter or, tighten than a screw would be. A screw, you just take a little screwdriver and you tighten it until it's the right, amount of friction that you need. Man, big old letdown right off the bat. So we'll kind of set that aside for now. We'll look at what this guy actually does offer. So you can see his new and improved color scheme is still shining through here. That amber on the chest looks really cool. And now you can see his new head sculpt. And again, this is based off of the original Shattered Glass Blurr, whose head was just a slight modification of the Transformers Cybertron Blurr. And I gotta say, he pulls off looking like that character a lot better than the Studio Series toy pulls off looking like G1 Blurr. Like, the face structure and everything is just so much better. He doesn't have like the giant like Jay Leno chin thing going on. I mean, no offense to Jay Leno, but Blurr's not supposed to look like him, so that toy should not look like Jay Leno. But yeah, you can see, the colors and everything are fantastic. Aside from this floppy piece of arm cable, all the other tolerances on them are great. That's why I'm leaning toward maybe just having a defective copy. At least I hope so, because this is only the second use of this mold. You should not have mold degradation already. The back of him looks pretty good too. He still has the disappointing fact that his car's nose cone area or hood area, whatever you want to call it, doesn't detach and become a shield like the original toy, like the Titans Return toy. They just decided, nah, it doesn't need to come off. It should stay there. So big disappointment, but that's nothing new, right? I'm not going to knock this recolor for something the original use of the mold already, kind of screwed up. But he does look pretty good. The fact that it's all black kind of helps hide the backpack a little bit, makes it blend in a little bit, not stand out as much. You can see here also have his weapons being stored on the back, which you can always just remove them. They store the same way they would in vehicle mode. That's not in the instructions, but it works just fine. So you can go ahead, you can attach have him hold his blaster. And now, one bit of good news is if you attach his little welding tool thing, it actually helps hold the kibble in a little bit. Not perfectly, it'll still want to sag on you, but, I mean, that's a lot better. I can actually pose him now and not try to hide it away. So, I guess if you want to get this guy on your shelf and you have the same issue that I do, you're just going to need to keep the welding torch on his hand, even though he never actually uses it in story or anything. I don't know what else you can do, honestly, unless you're an expert with altering pins and maybe tightening it, but I don't have the kind of kit or anything required for that. Now, I don't have the original Shattered Glass Blurr, but what I do have is the mold that spawned him, and that is the Transformers Cybertron Blurr, who himself is a retooling of the Transformers Armada Blurr and may or may not be the same character. That's kind of iffy there. Got the same body type, but a more G1 inspired color and head and all that. But here you can see the inspiration for this guy's head, and it's not exactly the same. They've gone and made the head a little less squat, a little more, I guess, realistically proportioned, and honestly makes him look a good bit more sinister than this rather, kind of round apple-shaped head we have here. But unlike the Studio Series Blurr, I would say that this actually improves upon the, inspiration, the base design, rather than become worse than what the inspiration is. So, yeah, pretty cool. This gives you a chance to just see where this comes from if you haven't seen this toy before, you don't remember what it looks like. I do wish I had the old Shattered Glass Blurr because it was a very cool-looking toy, but I sadly missed out on most of the old SG toys, so I'm just kind of playing catch-up now. And for our last comparison, here is the Studio Series Blurr, and you can see same mold, minus the head, very different color layouts, which is good, right? If you're going to recolor something, swap up the plastic colors and the paint layout and all that so you can really get some unique-looking pieces out of the same mold. I still stand by my statement that this guy is just way cooler looking than the original one, even if, the arm kibble is a universal issue. At least you can slap this on here to hide that. But yeah, I mean, just everything about his colors is way cooler. I think they really overused the white on the Studio Series Blur. And yeah, it should have been like maybe a really light gray instead of just plain white. It's kind of eye-searing. And they should have toned down the light blue just a little bit, right? I don't mean dark, but this is too bright. This is like sky blue. It doesn't look great. So I think this guy is just a better Blur toy. And if we're up to me, if I were like really going on a budget and I only wanted like one figure of each character and had to pick and choose, I would honestly get either the Titans Return or Legends Blur toy, even though he's not quite as like screen accurate as this one is. He's just a better figure overall, I would say. I mean, the only thing he's really lacking is like ankle tilt. But everything about him, like proportions, accessories, all that, just way cooler. And then I would go ahead and get this guy for your Shattered Glass one, if you don't already have, you know, the convention exclusive. Because I feel like he makes this guy really redundant. It's like, okay, cool, you gave us this mold, we'll go ahead and, you know, do something better with it, and you can just shoot. Just get out of here. We'll pop out our old Legends or TR Blur instead. So I know I'm really harsh on this guy, but he's just, in my opinion, the worst Studio Series 86 figure that's been released so far. Like, just, they've reached such highs with that little subline of a subline, and then you get this guy, and you're like, what happened? What went wrong here? You know, the giant kibble on the arms and stuff that could have just folded up over the arms like they should. I mean, just not a great mold. But at least this guy takes the lackluster mold and does something way more satisfying with it. This really evil-looking character who doesn't necessarily have to look exactly like G1 Blur, because, I mean, the original version of this guy didn't either. So it's okay if, you know, he has, like, the giant arm kibble that seems kind of out of place, you know, things like that. It's a little more forgivable when he's not going for that screen accuracy and honestly just falling very flat. Did you guys see that? Camera just shifted, got really bright all of a sudden. So yeah, I think I've made it abundantly clear how I feel about these two. Like, terrible mold, terrible colors, but at least cool colors on this one. That's kind of the summary here. Plus, way better head sculpt. And this completes our look at the new Shattered Glass Blur. Now, Blur was the first toy to be released, but anyone that's been watching the channel knows he's not the first Shattered Glass toy I've actually reviewed. Just things get on the back burner, all that. Plus, you know, something like Megatron is just a bit more exciting to review to me, so I did him first. But I decided to finally hunker down, get him done. I'll get Bumblebee, or not Bumblebee, but Goldbug done next, because the Jetfire's showing up. I want to get those out of the way before, you know, I do his review. So anyway, the toy itself, great colors, stellar use of a rather mediocre mold, big QC issues. Hopefully it's just my copy or only a few copies. I really don't want that to ruin an otherwise great looking figure, because that floppy kibble there is just unworkable if you're not, you know, willing to keep the welding torch thing attached to hide it. But I mean, the looks and everything are great. And I think he's a much better purchase. Like, if you didn't like the Studio Series Blur toy and you're like, I don't want to buy this, it's stupid, like, I don't blame you. I would recommend getting this guy, though. He's just really awesome, much better take on the mold, and a really nice take on the character. Much better head sculpt, very sinister looking. I'm all down for it. I will say there's also a rumor. So there's a Velocitron subline coming to Walmart for Legacy, and Blur is actually listed as one of them. And a lot of people are thinking it's going to be this mold again, but done up in colors more like this guy here, and possibly with a modified version of this head sculpt. If that's the case, I'm totally down. I just really, really hope they fix the arm kibble in the meantime, because I can't do it again. It would just break my heart. So yeah, if you haven't already, I mean, he's been out for a bit now, but if you haven't picked him up, I think he's still pretty readily available. I'd go ahead and get him. He's a really neat toy. I mean, the transformation, all that's fine. It just kind of fails at being, you know, a good-looking G1 Blur. But if you want something that's, you know, a little bit different than that, and someone a little more evil to add to your, you know, evil Autobots or whatever, I think he's totally worth picking up for $20. I guess it's about $30 if you include the comic, but if you get like the non-comic version that floats around out there and like canon and all that, it's going to be cheaper. Yeah, totally up to you, but I think he's worthwhile. Of course, that is just my opinion on Blur, so now I want to know what you all think of him. Do you see him as a worthy addition to your collection? Do you like Shattered Glass, or do you not like Shattered Glass? Do you not like the mold? Do you not care about Blur? Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this look at the new Transformers Shattered Glass Autobot Blurr. And with all that said, I will see you next time.